What if I told you the greatest country music legend alive found out he was dropped by his label the same way the mailman did? Not a phone call, not a meeting, not a conversation of any kind. He opened the local newspaper over breakfast one July morning in 1986 and read it on the page like everyone else. 26 years, over 60 albums, 8 #1 records in 8 consecutive years. Gone. The label called it a business decision. The man was 54 years old and had defined an entire genre of American music. And here is the detail nobody ever mentions. The man who would eventually run that same label was the very one who would save his career first. That is all it took. If you have not done so, like and subscribe. Here is how Johnny Cash got discarded by Nashville and came back to bury every person who wrote him off. John R. Cash was born February 26, 1932. In Kingsland, Arkansas. Cotton farming family, Depression-era poverty. Gospel music before he could walk. His mother taught him guitar. By the time the Air Force shipped him to West Germany in the early 50s, he was writing songs in barracks notebooks. When Cash came back stateside, he walked into Sun Records in Memphis. He recorded alongside Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins. He was one of the $1 Million Quartet. He was already in a category most musicians never reach. In 1958, Columbia Records came calling. The contract was lucrative enough to pry him away from Sun. His first Columbia single, All Over Again, hit the country top 5. His second, Don't Take Your Guns to Town, went to #1 and crossed over to the pop top 40.
All over again. Every time I think of you.
Don't take your guns to town, son. Leave your guns at home, Bill.
And that was just the warm-up. What followed was one of the most sustained commercial runs any American artist had ever put together. 8 #1 albums in 8 consecutive years. Ring of Fire, the best of Johnny Cash, in 1963. I Walk the Line in 1964. Johnny Cash's greatest hits in 1967. Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison in 1968, recorded live in front of 2,000 actual inmates. Every label executive told him not to do it. A live prison record was commercial suicide, they said. Cash went anyway. The album sold over 6 million copies. Johnny Cash at San Quentin followed in 1969. Man in Black came in 1971. You probably owned at least one of those albums. You heard Ring of Fire coming out of someone's kitchen radio. You sang along to I Walk the Line without even knowing you knew every word.
I fell into a ring of fire. I fell.
Your mind. I walk the line.
That voice, deep, unhurried, bass baritone, carved out of Arkansas limestone, was woven into the fabric of American life. Cash had his own primetime network television variety show on ABC. It ran from 1969 to 1971 and pulled tens of millions of viewers every week. He had Bob Dylan on the show, he had Louis Armstrong, he had Merle Haggard and Chris Christopherson. He performed at the White House for President Nixon. He recorded gospel albums, concept albums, protest albums. He played prison concerts when nobody else would. He played for the forgotten and the incarcerated and the dispossessed. They loved him back with a devotion no marketing department could manufacture. By 1970, Cash was not just a singer, he was a symbol. He wore black on stage every night and explained why in a song that climbed to #3 on the country charts. The color was for the poor, the beaten down, the forgotten. A generation of Americans heard that and felt seen. No other artist in country music had ever done anything like it. He was not a country artist. He was an American institution. And then the 1980s happened. But here's the turn. Country radio changed. Columbia Records changed. And Johnny Cash, who had never chased a trend in his life, did not change with them. By the early 80s, Nashville was moving toward a slicker, more polished, radio-friendly sound. The labels wanted artists who fit the format. Cash was the format. He was the original. But the accountants running Columbia's Nashville division were not looking backward. They were looking at airplay charts and quarterly sales figures. His last top 10 single came in 1981 with The Baron. After that, the hits dried up. Not because Cash had lost his voice or his instincts. The voice was still there. The instincts were still there. What was gone was the label's patience, and more importantly, their promotional support. Cash felt they had stopped pushing his records. Columbia felt his records had stopped selling. Both things were probably true, and neither side was willing to say it out loud. The label tried one last experiment in 1984. They handed Cash a novelty song called The Chicken in Black.
I said, stick 'em up, everybody, I'm robbing this place. Drop all of your money in my guitar case.
A song about his brain being transplanted into a chicken and a bank robber's brain transplanted into him. He recorded it. He filmed a comedic video. He performed it live on his Christmas television special. Waylon Jennings watched it and pulled him aside afterward. He told Cash he looked like a buffoon. Cash was furious. He demanded Columbia pull the video. The label refused. The damage was done. But here is what nobody tells you about that song. Cash did not choose it as an act of protest. The label brought it to him. They presented it as a return to his comedic roots, the same instinct that had given them A Boy Named Sue 15 years earlier. Cash accepted it in good faith.
At an old saloon on a street of mud, there at a table, dealing stud, sat the dirty...
He had no way of knowing it would become the symbol of everything the label thought of him, a joke, a legacy act to be managed toward the exit. By 1986, Columbia head Rick Blackburn had made his decision. Cash's contract was up. Mercury Records was offering more money than Columbia was willing to match. The plan was for Cash to announce the move himself, on his own terms. Before he could, a reporter from the Nashville Tennessean broke the story without authorization. It ran in the paper. Cash read it over breakfast. Blackburn later told Cash's biographer Graham Thompson it was the hardest decision he had ever made in his life. 26 years, over 60 albums, dismissed without a direct conversation. That is the part the label never put in their press release. But here is the kicker. Cash signed with Mercury Records and spent the next 5 years trying to find his footing. 6 albums in 5 years, solid musicianship, committed performances, critical response that ranged from warm to respectful, commercial response that was, by the standards of what Cash had once been, nearly invisible. The period became known in music circles as the Wilderness Years. He was Johnny Cash. He was still performing, and Nashville had essentially moved on without him. By the early 90s, Cash had been reduced to playing a residency in Branson, Missouri, a kind of low-rent entertainment resort town that existed entirely to service nostalgia. He later said he had given up on life during this period, not dramatically, quietly, the way a fire goes out when nobody feeds it. He was 60 years old. He was suffering from heart problems. He was recovering from a relapse of his drug addiction. He had spent 4 decades giving everything he had to music, and the music business had decided he was done. And then Rick Rubin walked into his life. Rubin in 1992 was not a country music producer. He was the co-founder of Def Jam Records. He had built careers with the Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, and Run D, MC. He had worked with Slayer and Metallica. He had precisely 0 experience in Nashville, and he had 0 interest in what Nashville thought. In October of 1992, Rubin attended Bob Dylan's 30th anniversary concert at Madison Square Garden. Cash and June Carter Cash performed that night. They sang, "It Ain't Me, Babe." Rubin watched from the audience and walked away.
But always strong to protect you and
Convinced he had just seen one of the most vital artists in American music, a man the industry had criminally discarded. He tracked down Cash's manager, Lou Rubin, and asked for a meeting. Cash arrived skeptical. He had heard too many pitches from too many label people. He asked Rubin directly what he was going to do that nobody else had done. Rubin said, "I don't know that we will sell records." That answer, honest, unpolished, completely unlike anything a label executive had ever said to him, was what opened the door. Rubin did not promise airplay. He did not promise chart positions. He promised creative freedom, and he promised to tell the truth. Cash, who had been managed and manipulated and marketed for 30 years, recognized something different when he heard it. Rubin took Cash back to the most stripped-down version of himself imaginable. No band, no studio. Just Cash's voice and an acoustic guitar, recorded mostly in Cash's own cabin in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and in Rubin's living room in Los Angeles. Old folk songs, old country songs. Songs by Tom Waits. a Gothic composition written specifically for Cash by Glenn Danzig of the Misfits, written in less than 20 minutes. American Recordings came out on April 26, 1994. The music world did not know what to do with it. Here was a 62-year-old country legend recording a spare acoustic album for a hip-hop and heavy metal label, and it sounded like the most important thing he had ever made. Rolling Stone called it one of Cash's greatest albums. Leonard Cohen heard it and said he was blown away. Young people started turning up at Cash's shows, not nostalgia seekers, new listeners who had found the voice and could not believe what they were hearing. American Recordings won the Grammy for Best Contemporary Folk Album in 1995. Nashville Country Radio did not play a single note of it. Rubin and Cash kept going. Unchained came out in 1996 with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers playing behind Cash. A full band, a warmer sound, a different kind of danger. When Unchained won the Grammy for Best Country Album in 1998, Nashville still had not touched it. Country radio had moved on to Garth Brooks and Shania Twain and a smoother, shinier sound. Cash was not on their playlists. He was not even nominated for the Country Music Awards that year. Rick Rubin spent $20,000 on a full-page advertisement in Billboard magazine. The ad featured a photograph taken at Cash's San Quentin prison concert in 1969. In the photograph, Cash is looking directly into the camera with his middle finger extended. The caption read, "American Recordings and Johnny Cash would like to acknowledge the Nashville music establishment and country radio for your support." Willie Nelson reportedly hung the ad on his tour bus and said, "John speaks for all of us." The man Columbia had called commercially irrelevant had just won 2 Grammys in 4 years without a single second of country radio airplay. And Rubin was not done. Neither was Cash. In 2002, Cash was 70 years old. He was suffering from an illness that was slowly stealing his vision. He was recording between hospital stays. Rubin played him Hurt, a song by 9 Inch Nails, written by Trent Reznor in 1994.
I focus on the pain.
The original is a wall of noise and distortion. Cash looked at Rubin like he was insane. Then he took the song home, lived with it, and came back. What Cash did to Hurt was not a cover. It was a transformation. He stripped everything away and sang it like a man who actually knew what it meant to look back on a life and reckon with every bit of wreckage in it. He changed one line, swapping a reference for a crown of thorns, the Christian imagery landing in his voice like it had always been there. The music video was directed by Mark Romanek and filmed at Cash's decaying Tennessee estate and the abandoned House of Cash Museum. It placed the aged and frail Cash alongside images of his younger self at the height of his fame. It was 7 minutes of reckoning, of everything the word legacy actually means before the industry gets to it and smooths it out. Trent Reznor received a tape of the video in the mail. He watched it alone that morning, tears welling, goosebumps, silence. Then he said, "I just lost my girlfriend because that song isn't mine anymore." American 4, The Man Comes Around, won Album of the Year at the 2003 CMA Awards. The Hurt video won the Grammy for Best Short-Form Music Video in 2004.
Full of broken thoughts.
It was the first non-compilation Cash album to go gold in 30 years. The same industry that had blacklisted him, the same radio establishment that Rubin had taken out a full-page ad to humiliate, now handing Johnny Cash their highest honors. Cash died on September 12, 2003, in Nashville, Tennessee. He was 71 years old. June Carter. Cash had died 4 months earlier. He had kept recording through her illness and through his own. He had not stopped. He had never stopped. Here is what you take away from all of this. Columbia Records looked at Johnny Cash in 1986 and saw a liability on a spreadsheet. A man who had stopped selling enough units to justify his contract. The machine made a calculation. The calculation said, let him go. What the machine could not calculate was what Cash still had to say. It turned out that the most important recordings of his career had not been recorded yet. The ones that would define how an entirely new generation understood American music. The ones that would make a 22-year-old who had never heard Ring of Fire sit alone in a room and feel something crack open. The label got rid of him. Rick Rubin found him in Branson, Missouri, playing to shrinking crowds. And Rubin walked into that same Columbia Records building 21 years later as its co-head. There is the loop, closed. The irony Columbia will carry forever is this: the producer who proved them wrong eventually ran them. The albums Nashville radio refused to play won the awards Nashville gives out. The artist they discarded by newspaper became, in the final decade of his life, more vital and more present in the culture than almost anyone else in the business. They called him not profitable enough. He came back and recorded Hurt at 70 years old, half blind between hospital stays, and made the songwriter who wrote it say the song was no longer his. That is what not profitable enough sounds like. That voice never did belong to a record label. It belonged to everyone who ever drove home alone at night with the radio on, needing to hear something true. Now you know the whole story. If it hit you the way it should, walk the line right over to the like button and hit subscribe. To my subscribers, you are the ones who keep the man in black alive. You rock.